Focus Man is here. We are joined with the man himself, Carl Shaw. Happy New Year, Carl. How you doing, man?
Happy New Year, sir. How are you?
I am doing fine. Actually, I have a cold, and I'm feeling like hell, and it's getting worse. But I booked the show for today, so I'm forced through it today, and I'll see where we land tomorrow. But just for the audience, Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk and subscribe and support their podcasts at patreon.com/silk and steel. How has your weekend been? Or how has your New Year's been so far, Carl?
I have been sick too, man. I have, my whole family was sick for the entire vacation. I'm just getting better now. So this is my actual first time recording with anybody since Christmas. So I'm looking forward to this.
I haven't even been around anybody. That's the wild part. It's not like I've been out here balling, hanging out in, the cold air and everything else. I woke up this morning and, it's like when it first starts, it's like, I think my throat may be sore. At least for me, it always starts with a sore throat. And sometimes you can't necessarily tell. And then you just start feeling crummy as the day gets further and further and further into the day. So it's fine. It's life. We are but men. Carl, let me get your take on the Venezuela thing, because I want to step into this from the perspective of China, because an argument can be made that the war, let's say the energy war that has been taking place, where the U.S. has been going after Russian oil, Chinese oil, Venezuelan oil, India in this case, that all of these things are effectively related back to China. But just to start off, give me your take on the Venezuela thing and we can step into it.
Well, first of all, this was not a regime change. The regime hasn't changed in Venezuela. They just had a change at the top of their government. This is nothing we haven't seen before. Hugo Chavez was the one who started U.S. hate boner for Venezuela. But when Hugo Chavez died, the baton was passed to Maduro. And now they have kidnapped Maduro. The vice president of Venezuela just took over. So there's no regime change. The U.S. is not getting their hands on the Venezuelan oil, at least not yet. This is actually a very typical Trump move. We talk about this when we talk about how Trump wrapped up the 12-day war against Iran by doing a glancing blow against Iran nuclear facility and declare victory. This is very much in style of Trump, which is going in for a very flashy operation, which he can then claim victory, doing a little victory dance. But in the end, it changes nothing. So this is what it looks like right now. They managed to kidnap Maduro, which allow people like Trump and Marco Rubio to claim victory. But fundamentally, they're not able to change the government in Venezuela. And the vice president who has assumed power is already making very strong protestations against the U.S. aggression toward Venezuela. Now, come to China. There's a lot of talk about how this is a huge humiliation for China. I don't see that happening because, first of all, Venezuela is never really a core interest of China. I mean, China would very much love to help out Venezuela. This is why China purchased 90% of Venezuela's oil export. But keep in mind, in the larger scale of things, that consists about 4% of China's oil imports. So very small fraction of actually what China imports. And oil is a fungible commodity. Even if U.S. impose a complete naval blockade against Venezuelan oil export, China can just get oil elsewhere. No, that's not a problem for China. In fact, because at this time, oil price has been at historical low. So China has been taking advantage of the low oil price to stockpile, to build up strategic stockpile. Chinese have been building up their strategic stockpile of oil for the past year. This is an area that's very little covered. So China is not going to run out of oil anytime soon. And on top of that, China is making the EV transition. They're rolling out huge build out of sustainable energy all across the country. There's a reason China is building high-speed rail and pushing for EV transition is to reduce energy dependency. So China can be self-sufficient in energy. They're making a lot of progress toward that end. This is one of the reasons the hydrocarbon price has been low recently. Now, having said that, what happened was not ideal for China, because China do have a lot of investment in Venezuela, but currently nothing has changed. Mm-hmm. And even Trump himself said, quote unquote, he will allow China to continue to get oil from Venezuela. So nothing has really fundamentally changed. It's a big flex of power by United States, to show that they're able to carry out kidnapping of a head of state, putting countries in Latin America on notice, right? I mean, like, speaking of trade, China's largest trade with Latin American countries, Venezuela doesn't even come close to the top. The biggest country that China has trade relationship with Latin America is Brazil and Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, you can argue maybe, the whole Venezuelan operation is really for U.S. end goal is Brazil, which is a much larger country, much more significant economy. But I think we're far from that. And this, again, this is a typical Trump operation. He carried out this very flashy Hollywood style, special forces operation, and then he can claim victory. And a lot of the MAGA base are celebrating right now, but nothing has fundamentally changed on the ground. Tell me what's your take?
What's changed? So, okay. So some of the reporting, to me, this comes across as if the Vice President Rodriguez was in the pocket of the U.S. That elements around Maduro effectively sold Maduro out, in which case Maduro gets taken out in his pajamas, put into chains, and evacuated to the United States, which means that the vice president, who Donald Trump has come out effectively saying, hey, she seems okay, or at the very least the New York Times is pointing out that she seems to be the likely successor, is part and parcel in the pocket of the U.S. I don't doubt that she would give some rhetorical flourishes, but she's been calling for the Venezuelan or the U.S. embassy to be opened back up in Venezuela. It's like, wait a minute, they've just kidnapped the leader of your country and you're calling for the U.S. to open up an embassy. Okay, well, that's weird. Like, why would you be willing to open up diplomatic relations at the point where the United States kidnapped illegally the leader of your country and is putting him up on bogus charges? And everybody and their mama knows at this point that the entire point is to get their hands on oil, they get their hands on resources in Venezuela, and that Rodriguez may be the one who's willing to effectively play ball. And the Armada hasn't gone anywhere. I'm calling it Armada, but basically the blockade, quote unquote, hasn't gone anywhere. And so Trump has made the point of saying, look, if the next person doesn't want to play ball, the next thing will happen to them too. So they do seem to be taking a piece off the chessboard, effectively taking a knight off the board, and then trying to exert basically a puppet government, a puppet regime, using the prior VP to do so with this idea of a fig leaf of continuity, where they can pretend as if, well, this is still a Bolivarian revolution. Not if she's a puppet.
There's still a lot of question, no doubt, around the whole kidnapping operation of Maduro. Mm-hmm. Like how was U.S. were able to fly these low-flying helicopters, land, pick up Maduro, and then fly off, and
without a bullet fired in anger.
And we saw those videos coming out on social media. You can see those helicopters with your naked eyes flying low over the sky of Caracas, right? I mean, like, I understand U.S. was carrying out operation to knock out air defenses all around Venezuela, but look, you might need sophisticated anti-air defense system to pick out like stealth fighters like F-35. I understand that. but these are Vietnam War era helicopters, flying in plain sight. And Venezuela actually possessed over 5,000 Russian-made Manpads. Those are the shoulder-fired missiles that's aimed to take down slow-flying helicopters, like with great success in Afghanistan against the Soviets. And there's no report of any U.S. helicopter down. I mean, there's the possibility could be the U.S. The Venezuelan military was completely caught by surprise. The U.S. planning was just super awesome. They were able to completely blindside the Venezuelan military, and on top of that, and the top brass of Pentagon were so confident that the Venezuelan military would be so incompetent that they wouldn't even get the Manpads out of the storage and to use against a U.S. helicopter. That's why we even authorized this operation, to have those helicopters flying low over Caracas. And Caracas is not even on the coast. People not familiar with geography. The U.S. had to fly their helicopters from their carriers on the Caribbean, but Caracas is not on the beach because the beach of Venezuela near the Caribbean is really hot. Caracas is on the other side of the mountain where it's a lot cooler with higher elevation. So they had to fly in from the Caribbean, go over the mountains, fly over to Caracas, land, grab Maduro, load him on the plane, and fly away. And suppose somehow there's no interception, and it was super smooth operation. I will leave that to your audience to speculate what's the reason. Now, it could be the U.S. special forces are just super awesome, and they're just super confident that the Venezuelan air defense, including Manpads, will pose no threat whatsoever to those U.S. helicopters. And then they were right, and then they turned out to be right. That's a possibility, or a possibility, as you suggested, that someone might have been bought off, at the top level Venezuelan government, and tell the military, hey, let's stand down. We don't need to do anything. So our deal work out. They're just going to grab Maduro and go. That is another possibility. This is another reason, like, people are saying, oh, Russia and China not doing anything. Look, Venezuela actually, compared to the other Latin American countries, they're actually pretty well armed, right? The Venezuelan military, they're going to have trouble to go toe-to-toe with the U.S. military, but they certainly have capability to handle a bunch of low-flying helicopters into their capital to grab a very high-value target, who is the president of the country, right? And you would imagine that he would have some kind of some sort of security around him, or at least get him to a place to a bunker or something. But that didn't happen. So we'll probably won't find out until years later the real details. I don't believe the Pentagon debriefing they're giving out. I think that's a lot of psyops. They're basically saying we did an awesome job because we took a lot of time planning. The CIA has tracked Maduro's movement. That's why we know exactly where to go. We were able to get this all done, wrapped up within a couple hours. I don't quite buy that. But with all those talks about this is targeted toward China, actually it's the United States that needs the Venezuelan oil more than China does, because United States, they have these legacy refineries, particularly along the Gulf of America now, like in the southern United States, that was set up to refine heavy crude, the type of crude oil that's produced by Venezuela. So this is why even all throughout this blockade, Chevron was continually shipping oil from Venezuela to United States because they receive a special waiver from the Trump administration. Okay, so Chevron is still shipping oil from Venezuela to United States right now, all throughout this ordeal, because U.S. needed those heavy crude from Venezuela to sustain their refinery operation in southern United States. Now, this is also what Trump means when he says we want their oil. He actually says we want them to return the stolen oil back to us, because he's talking about Venezuela's nationalization of the oil industry under Hugo Chavez, when the Venezuelan government told all these foreign multinationals, particularly U.S. oil majors, like, look, you have been operating in this country for a long time, and you only give a very small minority share of the profit to the Venezuelan government. That will no longer stand. We demand a more equitable share of the oil wealth. If you don't like our arrangement, you can get the hell out. That's when a lot of the U.S. big companies, oil companies, did pull out. Only Chevron was in Venezuela because it abided to the new profit sharing scheme of the Venezuelan government. And that's why they also received the special waiver from Trump all throughout all this time to continually ship that oil to the United States. So this is United States trying to shore up its position in its own neighborhood, like they laid out in that national security document, which they openly released, because like Latin America is number 2 on their list right now. This is exactly what they said they were going to do. But I mean, like, there's not that much, given what has happened, what has transpired during the kidnapping of Maduro. There's not much even China or Russia could do. Right. They can sell more weapons, but those weapons will only be useful if the military can actually use them. Short of that, they will have to station troops in Venezuela. I don't think either China or Russia is at that step. I don't think they're ready to station their troops to man air defense over crackers. First of all, Latin America is one of the furthest continent from China. China do not have the naval expeditionary power projection capability the way the United States still does around the world. Where's the Chinese naval base, for example, in Cuba or Venezuela, that will able to provide logistic support for even such an operation? And China knows its own limitations, right? I mean, like, people give, I know some people brought up example of the Cold War when China did provide support to Vietnam, for example. But Vietnam is right on the border of China. This is why China was able to provide unlimited support to Vietnam during the war, because Vietnam is right on the border. China has railroad that just go right into Vietnam, and China actually did send 300,000 PLA troops into Vietnam to manage the anti-air defense side, and also to rebuild the bridges and infrastructure that's been bombed by Americans. But Venezuela is just a little bit like ocean too far. I mean, like, I don't think why people think China actually has the kind of not even talking about intention of replacing United States as a world hegemon, but even have the capability of the current U.S. power projection. And China doesn't have that. There's really not much China could do. Even if China wanted to send troops to Venezuela, right? But that's what, given what has transpired, that's what would be needed to prevent that kidnapping from happening. If China actually have troops on the ground manning the air defense systems, but because for whatever reason that those who weren't working on the night Maduro was kidnapped.
Well, also Venezuela would have to be willing to fire a shot. There's that too.
Exactly.
Right. It's like, what's the point of supporting a country in a war if the country is not willing to fire a shot in anger at their aggressor? Um, I think what people see, and the reason why people bring up China and Russia, is because they recognize that Venezuela has a relationship with both. I mean, China's diplomat was there like hours before this even took
Yep.
place. Do you know what that relationship, what that
I
conversation
mean,
was about?
what that shows is obviously China had no intelligence what's coming. Otherwise they would not have bothered to send in that delegation 5 hours before the U.S. operation started.
Mhm.
I don't buy this was there's a lot of talk on the internet about this like deliberate humiliation of China, blah blah blah. But I don't, because for operation of this kind, they have to be in preparation for a long time, right? Like it's not something they can just pull off within 5 hours. Oh, Chinese delegation just visited Maduro. Let's go grab him. That will humiliate those Chinese. That's not how this kind of military operation works.
Right.
There was like month in planning, right? And the Pentagon briefing, they actually said they were for 15 days. The U.S. military asset in the region was basically a holding pattern, waiting for the weather, waiting for the right weather. So yeah, I think it's just an unfortunate coincidence. The optics wise, it didn't look good for China, but I don't think it was this like it just showed China didn't have the intelligence of
Mhm.
what was about to take place. So whatever that was discussed is kind of irrelevant right now because Maduro got snatched. We have to see how the fallout. What is a fallout? Whether as you say there will be meaningful rapprochement between Venezuela and United States. I mean that could change the relationship of Venezuela versus China and Russia. But
Yeah.
so far, we haven't seen that. I'm willing to give the Venezuelan government benefit of the doubt to see how things where all the peace lands. It's still too early right now to pass judgment on that.
I think what people are looking at, they are looking at this not as an isolated incident. Meaning, when I look at this, I don't look at this as, oh, golly gee, the United States just snatched Nicolas Maduro. Huh, that's strange. I don't look at it in that kind of, was it myopic terms, in like this kind of very narrow course of events. I look at it in this kind of larger context of, okay, well, China buys oil from Russia. China buys oil from Venezuela. China buys oil from Iran. All of these countries are, let's say, at odds in this kind of global, quote unquote, chessboard against the United States and, for all intents and purposes, the West. The US is attacking Russia right now, currently, with the goal of, at the very least, damaging the country itself and even running direct energy wars, even interdicting ships, calling it a quote unquote shadow fleet in the way that they call it. The US has been going after Iranian ships that have been coming from Venezuela. And those ships were taking oil to China, whether it was under a Chinese flag or not. And now you have a producer of oil, which has ungodly amounts of oil underneath foot that has just been taken off the chessboard. Like, meaning there seems to be an overriding concerted attempt policy to go after energy producers with the idea that China is the big bad ultimately. I mean, I don't know how China sees it. Does China see it?
I mean, this is obviously about oil, right? This is the whole reason U.S. is also going after Nigeria, because Nigeria is the largest oil producer in Africa. But look, China can get its oil elsewhere. China also gets its oil from Saudi Arabia. United States is not going to bomb Saudi Arabia anytime soon, right? China gets its oil from the Gulf, other than Iran as well. So China can get its oil from the world market anywhere. And currently, despite all the U.S. machinations against the oil producer in regions, they still haven't been able to raise the oil price sufficiently high. The oil price is still at historically low price levels right now, even given what has happened. So so in that way, it's not really impacting China's energy supply coming in.
I see.
This is what I say. China has plenty of oil. They have plenty of suppliers of oil, and they have been, like I said, they have been steadily building up their oil strategic reserve for past year or so, taking advantage of the low oil price. So now China has, I think the last report, they have about 18 months. They have about like 18 months of oil in their strategic oil reserve. So China is not about to run out of oil anytime soon. They are prepared. China always prepare for all kind of contingencies, right? This is also why they're branching out their energy to, whether it's through nuclear power or solar or wind, and all that is designed to push the whole electrification of China, so China's transportation will be less reliant on hydrocarbon. With people riding high-speed rail or electric cars, they don't need as much oil, and so that trend is still ongoing. So this is whatever United States is doing, even if their ostensible goal is saying, "Oh, we're doing this to get China," it's not really having a real impact on China. This is what I'm saying. China obviously doesn't like it. Friendly countries like Venezuela are being targeted, they say so as much. But ultimately, it actually doesn't affect China's bottom line as much.
Are they concerned that interdicting either these ships or the U.S. being more provocative and taking countries off the board that have relationships with China is going to affect how countries relate to China, not necessarily wanting to get into the U.S. crosshairs? And for all intents and purposes, it sounds like you're saying for China, this is just business as usual. But for the countries that are being attacked, it's not business as usual.
That's correct. I mean, people point out, 90% of the Venezuelan oil export go to China. Yes, but that's more a dependency of Venezuela on China rather than vice versa, because the Venezuelan oil only accounts about 4% of China's oil imports, and China can source that oil elsewhere, not a problem. And so for China, there is impact, of course. China, like the Chinese oil tankers, already been redirected away from Venezuela. Now they're going to head over to west coast of Africa to pick up some oil from Nigeria or elsewhere, because of the current naval blockade and seizing of ships. But yeah, there will be some impact, but it's not. I mean, that just means that those oil tankers are going to go head elsewhere to pick up oil.
But isn't there something above and beyond just oil? I mean, is there not a principle at play? And I'm not trying to pressure you on this. This is my own curiosity about this.
Well, I mean, it's very obvious. There's no such thing as international law, right? I mean, that's Trump already made it very clear on that. I mean, all this talk about rule-based international order, that's all bogus. There is no international laws. We're all function under the law of the jungle here. You have Katie Miller, right, the wife of Stephen Miller, is tweeting out Greenland is next, tweeting out the map of Greenland with American flag painting on it. Greenland is next. I mean, conceivably, United States will actually do that. You have Prime Minister Denmark is saying, protesting like, we have been a good NATO ally of the United States. We don't deserve to be treated this way. But it's like back in the ancient Greece, right? When the Athens says to the weaker party, I think it was Melia, and says, the strong will do what they will, and this weak must suffer what they must. And that's occurring in the Trump foreign policy right now.
Is there any provocative action short of, let's say, take Taiwan off the board? Let's take them off the board. Short of Taiwan, that would have China to take a more, let's say, more muscular.
Well, you get Taiwan is a core Chinese interest. So if United States were to mess around with the Taiwan button, yes, then China will definitely get involved. So what I have been trying to tell your audience all this time, I don't know how much is getting through, is China is not out there to overthrow the U.S. hegemony. China was okay with the post-World War order that was constructed with the United States because China has figured out how to make that system work for it. So in a way, you can say that China is allowing for the continued U.S. hegemony to exist, as long as U.S. do not step on China's toes.
Core interests.
Right? Like the core interest, which would be Taiwan and maybe even South China Sea. And if United States do step on China's toe on those issues, you will see the U.S. hegemony melt away very quickly, because then China would respond. But outside of those issues, China is okay. China is not out there to try to cause a collapse of U.S., because that will be catastrophic for the international system, a sudden collapse. China do not want a sudden collapse of the United States. What China would prefer is a slow decline of United States into irrelevance. And that's already happening. Trump is doing a good job doing that. And so China, this is why there's a meme of China do nothing and win, just like don't interrupt your enemy when they're stabbing themselves in the foot. So China do not want to to do anything to cause a sudden collapse of the U.S. imperial system. China prefer it just gradually decline until it completely fade away. Because that will do minimum damage during the transition period. I don't think a lot of people get that, particularly people from the United States. But yes, you can say, in a way, China is allowing for the U.S. hegemony to continue to exist. Because yes, China do have the power to put an end to it, but that will only happen if U.S. encroach on core Chinese interests like Taiwan.
I think this feels like a nipping around the edges strategy that the U.S. is going with. So let's go after Vietnam. Let's go after or create conflict in Cambodia and Thailand. Let's go after China and Pakistan. India and Pakistan. Let's go after Venezuela. Let's go after, meaning it seems that the objective is not we will be a benign hegemon, or we will be a hegemon that would just fade into the good night. It seems that
the U.S. has no plan to fade away. I mean, that all they're doing right now is lashing out to try to salvage their hegemonic status. This is the whole. This is how the national security document reads to me. Anyway, they plan to shore up the U.S. hegemony by trying to consolidate their position in the West Hemisphere. And then they will have more energy to spend elsewhere. But first, they want to focus on their so-called near their backyard, right, which is Venezuela. But like I said, I don't see until I see that the U.S. oil majors are welcome with open arms back in Venezuela on the old profit sharing terms, in Trump's words, Venezuela returned the stolen oil back to United States. Until I see that happen, I don't think there has been a successful regime change in Venezuela. I just don't see that happening.
Carl, what has been the latest relationship between India and China?
Well, it's interesting because India is right now they're having a cold peace with China, in particular because United States have been slapping them around, right? Because for a long time, India saw itself as, okay, hey, we be your partner of the United States. We can work together to contain China as part of the quad of democracies. But now, in the more recent term, Trump has been slapping them around, first over the purchase of Russian oil and over the tariffs, and mostly just because Trump could, because India is at a weaker position vis-a-vis United States. Unlike China said, hey, rare earth, we're going to squeeze your balls around rare earth, and Trump back off. But India doesn't have that same leverage with United States. So Trump decided they feel like they don't need India as much anymore, because they saw that India got its nose bloody in the conflict with Afghanistan, with Pakistan. And so from Trump's perspective, then why do we need you to contain China? Obviously, you can't even contain Pakistan. So, like I said, Trump doesn't respect weakness. He despises weakness. He only respects strength. And this deterioration of India-U.S. tie is actually pushing India to at least to have a cold peace with China right now. So you don't see much talk about India-China strife at the moment.
Yeah, that does seem to be the way this is breaking down. Like the more that you put pressure on one, the push goes in a different direction, creating relationships between these various countries. Yeah, it's interesting. That's all. It's not. Again, it's not that I'm trying to pressure on this. I know a lot of people are going to give China a side eye on this. I think what people forget sometimes is countries are realists. Like they do things that are in their best interests. And I'm not going to extend myself to take a hit for somebody else. Unless it's a core interest. So yeah, Russia will go into Ukraine because it's a core interest.
Chinese government is serving the interest of China, like they should. Unlike the government of the United States, which served the interests of Israel, right? It's a U.S. that's been the odd one out. It's a U.S. that's been the abnormal one. China and Russia are just, real countries, are, with real sovereignty, and they actually do manage their country for the interests of their people, like they should be.
Give me your predictions for the year. I'm very curious on your, let's say, geopolitical predictions in relation to China, in relation to, and you can go anywhere with this, but definitely in relation to China. I'm nailing all my guests down on this. It's the first.
Well, we let's go for the easy one. We're gonna have the April Trump visit to China, right? So I don't expect a big flare up between U.S. and China before that time. The both sides will try to play nice for the upcoming, to make sure the upcoming Trump visit to China will, at least optically, will look like a success. So there will be a sort of semi-détente happening from now to April, in span of 4 months. After 4 months, that's too far in the future. I don't have that kind of power to foretell the future 4 months away. But within the 4 months, I think that there will be muted U.S.-China competition.
So you think they're effectively going to have the détente that Trump has accepted
within the 4 months? Yeah, within the 4 months. Yeah, for sure.
Do you continue?
Anything can happen, because we know United States is not a monolith. Again, it's not like Trump is the one that's calling all the shots. It could very well be like another vested interest in the U.S. government that will plan to derail this. But currently, that's a trajectory. The current trajectory is like.
No, I'm sorry. Please continue. That was my mistake.
No, this is basically the whole. I'm just going off what the Pentagon has published, right? The national security strategy. Like right now, the United States is going to focus on its own sphere of influence, which they consider to be all of the West Hemisphere, and that's they will deprioritize the direct confrontation with China. Of course, you can argue what they're doing is consolidating their space so they can confront China later down the road. But In the meantime, there could be a temporary truce. Yeah.
But do you see the interdicting of ships hasn't changed, and it doesn't seem to change? And I guess my thing is, like, if you're going to knock over a country that is obviously, let's say, a close friend of another country, I mean, Venezuela could have been a BRICS nation, and it almost was. And the U.S. would do this entirely without any issue at all, and take down ships without any issue. It's only a happenstance that there hasn't necessarily been one holding a Chinese flag at this point.
They're doing this through like kind of legal, there's this kind of legal loophole because they seized 2 ships that have been towed to United States. One ship is because they say its registry is not valid. So that means, according to UN Convention of the Sea, any country can board it. For board a country that's not officially registered to any nation. And because that ship is also sanctioned under US law, so they can bring it into US jurisdiction to answer the US court. Now, the second ship that they seized, which was Panamanian flag, but owned by a Hong Kong company. The reason they claim they could seize it is because the ship itself is Panamanian flag. It's registered with Panama. And Panama has a treaty with United States, which allowed them to board Panamanian flag ships and to seize it. So Panama says, okay. And this is US justification for even though that ship is actually owned by a Hong Kong company. So what that means from now on, I will foresee not probably a lot of Chinese ships are going to reflag themselves. They're not going to be they're not going to do the Panamanian registry now. And this already happened with Bella One. Bella One was was one of these like unregistered ships and sanctioned by US, and US Navy was chasing it. And then Bella One said, okay, we're registered now. We're now registered in the Russian registry. Now they painted a Russian flag on the hull, and then the Russian embassy actually sent a notice to the U.S. government, say, hey, this is legit. This is legit our ship now, and please leave it alone. So Bella One, now renamed Marinera, was allowed to leave. They just sell to Atlantic right now. So I think in the future, there's not going to be any more Chinese ships be flagged under Panamanian registry. I think that's what's going to happen.
Oh, they're going to be running up the Chinese name.
Yeah, or any other flags. Yeah, they're not going to be flying the Panamanian flags anymore. Just so because they know that U.S. will use that as excuse to seize them.
Basically, China is daring the U.S. to take its ships. I mean, and that's assuming it's even an issue if the U.S. just starts taking the oil from Venezuela directly. Basically saying no more ships will be allowed into Venezuela from anybody else other than U.S.
I mean that's what they're doing right now. They're carrying out an economic blockade of Venezuela. The whole purpose of they seizing those ships is also serving as intimidation, right, to the other potential ships coming and say like, hey, we could do this, and to warn them to stay away. Yeah.
China also has a huge port in Peru. So if the U.S. is going to go ride this boat ride this car to the wheels fall off and say, look, we've taken Venezuela, we may make actions after Colombia, we may go after Mexico, etc. What happens to that port? I guess I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I guess what I'm trying to get at is China does have interests. Otherwise, they wouldn't have set up the port. They wouldn't have had the relationship with Venezuela. They wouldn't have shipping. They wouldn't have any of these things if any of these things were interests. And it sounds like in the conversation that it's kind of like, yeah, but it's business as usual. We're not really going to deal with our interests. If that means other countries take a hit, then that means other countries take a hit. If that means we need to reshuffle our oil shipments, then
look. I mean, look at what happened. China had a lot of investment. Also had investment in Iraq before Saddam's overthrow. China also had investment in Libya when Gaddafi got overthrown, and China just ate it. China just ate it and say, okay, we'll just evacuate our personnel. We wash our hands. But what that means was when later Iraq did have a functional government, China came back and they pick up oil contract where they left off. And so now the Chinese oil companies are back in Iraq, servicing oil wells. And that's how China operates. China is not going to go to war for
long-term view.
You know?
Oh, by the way, I'm not saying go to war. Oh, God,
yeah,
no.
but yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean go to war. I guess, okay, fair enough. I'm not going to beat the dead horse. Your point is time doesn't stop. At some point, a government may cobble itself back together after the U.S. destroys it. And when it does, China will be there willing to make amends and make relationships with those governments once they reform themselves.
That has been the historical pattern. I mean, that's how China operates.
Interesting. Carl, this has been very informative. China's always weird to me because of the way it operates. It's far less aggressive in a country that seem to be moving into, let's say, a world leader status. They seem to be more just, we'll go with the flow, which is not the norm in regards to the way that European countries behave.
I've been saying over and over again, China has no interest to take over as the world hegemon or the world police. I mean, like I have been saying this again and again. China is only interested to develop China. I mean, to develop China, that however that whatever that takes. So, unless United States step on China's toes in what China consider core interests, which would be like the case of Taiwan Strait, that would trigger a very violent response. But other than that, no.
Not so much. Interesting. Carl, man, you have my appreciation. I'm glad that you're feeling better and you're over your cold.
Thank you.
And Happy New Year. And just for the audience, Carl Xia, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China.
I just want to add one more thing. I saw some of the comments. I'm just saying people are calling me like defending China's policy or whatever. I'm just telling you how China works, right? If like the reality doesn't conform your ideology, maybe you need to change your ideas to be more reality based. I'm just simply telling you how China. This is how China operated. This is how China operated in the past, and that's likely how China will operate in the future. I'm just telling you how it is. And like I say, if reality doesn't conform to your worldviews, maybe you need to think about changing your worldview. So,
to be fair to the audience, they're pissed off, and
I understand that, but
it's not. I don't think they're taking targeted cue on this. I think from their point of view, it's like this is outrageous. The U.S. used the pretext of drugs to just overthrow another country. From my point of view, countries.
But this is nothing new. U.S. has always been doing this for like the past couple hundred years. This is really nothing new. I don't act why people are acting with Pikachu face. U.S. has always been doing this. This is to be expected. But, but it is what it is.
Agreed. I mean, obviously they did this to Syria, Iraq, Libya, etc. It feels. And I know we've had the governments that the United States overthrown over the course of the last 70 years in South America, like the kill squads and everything else. But there was, I think, a fig leaf of, give me your take on this. I think it breaks down into two things. Since this is kind of where the conversation is going. It breaks down into two different points. One, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the U.S. was a hegemon. It was the undisputed hegemon. There was no other hegemon. The U.S. was the sole superpower on the planet. And so the U.S. could run roughshod over governments in South America, or for that matter, around these countries in the Middle East, et cetera. And nobody else could do anything about it, short of maybe the Soviet Union. But when the Soviet Union fell, the pinnacle. And then you get like this huge amount of hype from BRICS. You get a huge amount of hype from other countries that seem to be cobbling themselves together, cobbling their powers together in order to direct a different world. And on the alternative media, a lot of that hype has been dumped into BRICS, China, Russia, etc.
I have always said BRICS is an economic bloc. It's
Yes.
not a military alliance. BRICS is not NATO. It's not the mirror image of NATO. It's an economic bloc. There's not even a alliance, much less a military alliance. So, and people have to look. China and Russia, they will assert themselves, around their own borders. Like Russia in case of Ukraine, China in case of Taiwan or South China Sea, but they are not, they lack both the intention and the capability currently to project power halfway around the world.
Right.
Especially some place as far as Venezuela. I mean, that's just not realistic. People, I don't see what people were expecting, but
yeah. I think Mark even said, he was like, dude, Venezuela is going to be overturned. Nobody's going to get involved. And that's effectively what took place. But people still feel raw about the way that this took place, and that, I guess this issue of justice and this kind of continuously being hit with all of these countries effectively left to their own devices. People feel some kind of way about it. But no, I agree with you. Countries are realists. I don't have, it is not my expectations that countries are going to extend themselves beyond their own core interests. And if people think that it's going to take place because of either the membership in BRICS, because of things that they have said, like at the UN or something like that, I think they're going to be continuously disappointed.
I mean, given what has transpired, let's say people are pissed about the kidnapping of Maduro. Only thing that, given the fact that, Venezuelan military have proven ineffective, the only thing that could have changed was if China or Russia send their own military personnel to take over the defense of the Venezuelan airspace. I mean, but that's not happening, man. That's not realistic.
That's a hell of an escalation. That would be a massive escalation in that case. And it's like, what's the other alternative? Get into, I suppose China could use economic levers or Russia could use economic levers. But again, that gets to the realist thing. Russia's in the middle of a war. And that's not the way China functions. So yes, I understand you're looking at their comments like, what the F? It doesn't.
No, I'm used to it. I mean, I'm already used to the abuse from the Twitter, from my tweets, the comments in the tweet. But people are just, I understand people are upset, but I'm just saying, hey, I'm just telling you how it really works. This is
your point. This is not defense. This is just reality.
I'm not even inputting my own read into this. I'm just saying, hey, this is just how China works. So it's just how China will act, and this is how China has act in the past, and this is how China act in the immediate future, and that's just how the world is.
Yeah. It's like, dude, it's not my opinion. It's just how it is. There's a difference in those things. Carl, man, you have my deepest appreciation.